Good Thursday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for June the 1st. Today we are starting the final section of Deuteronomy, beginning here in chapter 27 and going through the rest of the book. Chapter 34, we're going to have Moses' final words and speech to the people. I'm also going to see his death recorded here within the text of Deuteronomy. I appreciate so much you tuning in today and for reading along with me over the last 5 months as we begin the final month of the first half of the year 2023. Really appreciate all the time that you spent reading along with me in Scripture, and I do hope that has been a great benefit to you as we've been reading through the Old Testament, beginning in Genesis and working our way through the end of Esther, looking at the historical writings of the Old Testament. Let me get the text of Deuteronomy up on the screen for us, and we'll begin to look at this section here, chapters 27 through 30, being the text that really focuses on the warning and the final ultimatum that Moses is laying down before the people of Israel, that they needed to, there's basically two paths. They needed to and should listen and obey, and that's going to lead to blessing. But there's also a warning that if you rebel, there's going to be devastation upon you, and eventually exile is going to be the end result of rebellion. Remember that the people whose land you are about to inhabit, they are being expelled from the land because of their own rebellion, because of their sin and wickedness. Don't follow in the same path as them, or else you are going to suffer in the same way as they suffered. So that's what we're seeing here in chapters 27 through 30. So let's read here in chapter 27. Tomorrow we will look at chapter 28 and then finish up on Saturday for this week reading in chapter 29. Tomorrow's read is going to be a bit longer than what we've had here recently. So just be ready for that. Just a bit of a longer section because it is going to include in tomorrow's section both blessings and cursings, whereas today we get a little bit of instruction just about building the monument, probably about the best thing we can use, the best word we can use to describe what they're building along with the altar, and then a short section of curses within this chapter 27. And tomorrow there's going to be a lot more of blessings and cursings in 28. But with all that said, let's begin reading here in Deuteronomy chapter 27 and verse number 1. Deuteronomy 27, verse number 1, Moses and the elders of Israel commanded the people, keep every command I'm giving you today. When you cross the Jordan into the land Yahweh your God is giving you, set up large stones and cover them with plaster. Write all the words of this law on the stones after you cross to enter the land Yahweh your God is giving you, a land flowing with milk and honey, as Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, has promised you. When you have crossed the Jordan, you are to set up these stones on Mount Ebal, as I am commanding you today, and you are to cover them with plaster. Build an altar of stones there to Yahweh your God. Do not use any iron tool on them. Use uncut stones to build the altar of Yahweh your God and offer burnt offerings to Yahweh your God on it. There you are to sacrifice fellowship offerings. Eat and rejoice in the presence of Yahweh your God. Write clearly all the words of this law on the plastered stones. Moses and the Levitical priest spoke to all Israel. Be silent, Israel, and listen. This day you have become the people of Yahweh your God. Obey Yahweh your God and follow his commands and statutes I am giving you today. On that day, Moses commanded the people, when you have crossed the Jordan, these tribes will stand on Mount Gerizim to bless the people: Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Joseph, and Benjamin. And these tribes will stand on Mount Ebal to deliver the curse: Reuben, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, and Naphtali. The Levites will proclaim in a loud voice to every Israelite, the person who makes a carved idol or cast image, which is detestable to Yahweh, the work of a craftsman, sets it up in secret is cursed, and sets it up in secret is cursed. And all the people will reply, Amen. The one who dishonors his father or mother is cursed. And all the people will say, Amen. The one who moves his neighbor's boundary marker is cursed, and all the people will say, Amen. The one who leads a blind person astray on the road is cursed, and the people will say, Amen. The one who denies justice to a resident alien, a fatherless child, or a widow is cursed, and all the people will say, Amen. The one who sleeps with his father's wife is cursed. for he has violated his father's marriage bed. And all the people will say, Amen. The one who has sexual intercourse with any animal is cursed. And all the people will say, Amen. The one who sleeps with his sister, whether his father's daughter or his mother's daughter, is cursed. And all the people will say, Amen. The one who sleeps with his mother-in-law is cursed. And all the people will say, Amen. The one who secretly kills his neighbor is cursed. And all the people will say, Amen. The one who accepts a bribe to kill an innocent person is cursed. And all the people will say, Amen. Anyone who does not put the words of this law into practice is cursed. And all the people will say, Amen. And that is Deuteronomy chapter 27. Deuteronomy chapter 27, 4 times by my count that I could find, maybe I missed one, I see where it continually says something along the lines of when you cross the Jordan. That's verse number 2. Verse number 3 says, after you cross into the land Yahweh your God is giving you. Verse number 4 says, when you have crossed the Jordan. Verse number 12 says, when you have crossed the Jordan. So all of these commands and these ordinances, these statutes, this teaching that is given here, this instruction that they are to carry out, it's all predicated upon the fact that they are going to cross the Jordan into the promised land. And that's really been the underlying foundation of everything that has been going on here, that all of this is built upon the fact that they are going to enter the promised land. Not an if, but when. Not an if, but when. Because God has made this promise, he is sure to bring it to pass. Now, that is notwithstanding the failures of the people, because they themselves, the generation prior, failed to enter the land because they did not trust God. But so long as this generation, they've shown a good propensity thus far to follow the commands of Yahweh. So long as they continue to do that, they will enter the promised land. But once they enter the promised land, there are further instructions for them to carry out. Number one, they are to build this monument of some sort, this large stone. They are to cover it with plaster, and then they are to write. They are to write all the words of the law on these stones. They are to take this as it really is. I don't know what other word to really use, but to describe this as a monument that they were to build that contained the law of the Lord. And this would be a reminder. Anytime somebody would see that, they would be reminded of their responsibility as the people of God. But additionally, these stones were to be set up on Mount Ebal, and then there was also to be an altar that was built there. Of course, an altar used to make sacrifices and to cleanse the people, to atone for the people before they are able to stand before Yahweh. So these things to be done in verses 1 through 8. Now, verse number 9 says that Israel, or that Moses and the priest, they speak to all Israel. They're to be silent, they're to listen, and they're to remember that today you have become the people of Yahweh your God. Not that they weren't the people of Yahweh your God today, but today was a very special day. Again, they have entered the land now, and they are to know with certainty that God has been faithful to them, and now the necessary faithfulness from them toward God is really ratcheted up at this point. Because look, he's done exactly what he said he would do. Are you going to do exactly what you proclaim you are going to do? That seems to be the focus of what the exercise they're going to engage in Mount Ebal, is that they are going to say, this is the crime, the punishment is being cursed. All the people say amen. Yes, we agree with that. We concur with this revelation to us from God that these things will bring a cursing. So obey Yahweh your God and follow his commands and statutes I'm giving you today. The tribes are split up. Some of them are on Mount Gerizim. Some of them are on Mount Ebal. And yet it's the Levites who proclaim in a loud voice to every Israelite these 12 curses. 12, that's seems pretty explanatory. 12 curses, 12 tribes, just a number that continues to show up time and time again. Now, what's interesting is that there's curses here in chapter 27. There's also a large section of curses in chapter 28. Why two different sections? Well, this one right here seems to be a little bit different from chapter 28. Here we have specific sins, but non-specific curses. It's just, if you do this, you will be cursed. Whereas in chapter 28, it's a bit more explicit as far as what the curse itself will be. So let that be. Maybe this just is kind of an appetizer for what you're going to see in chapter 28. But it seems that these curses follow a decent flow. There's probably a bit of a chiastic structure. I should have looked at that a little more closely, but it begins with Yahweh. You don't make a carved image and bow down to it. You don't do that because Yahweh is your God. And then it goes from Yahweh to family. Don't be dishonoring father or mother. Then it goes to your neighbor, which you don't move your neighbor's boundary mark. Remember, that's akin to theft. You're stealing their property. But then you also don't sin against the helpless person, the blind person, or the resident alien, or the fatherless child, or the widow. And then later on, it speaks about not committing bestiality. So it goes from making sure that you have right relationships. Sorry about that. And make sure you have right relationships with God, with your family, with your neighbor, with the helpless, and even with nature itself. In all of these realms, you are to strive to be people who live righteously. Remember, the idea of righteousness is to basically just be right, to be right between yourself and God, and to also be right between you and your fellow man, and even in some cases, being right between you and God's creation. But it's not just enough for these curses to be said and for the people to say amen. I want to note verse 26. Anyone who does not put the words of this law into practice is cursed. It's not enough to just say it. It's not just enough to say, yes, I agree to this. And that's what amen means. Amen means that I agree with what you're saying. I'm with you. I concur. But you must put these things into practice. You must put these things into practice. Another thing that we might note about these particular sins is that twice within this text, in verse 24 and also in verse 15. So in verses 15 and 24, we both see the idea that these are secret sins. A lot of these things that are said here could be done in secrecy. So that's another element to this, is that God sees it all. You might think you're getting away with it because others don't see you doing it, but God sees it and God will hold you accountable. So don't sit here and just say amen and then go sneak off somewhere and do the opposite. No, say amen here and know that you're expected to do the same whenever other people are not looking as well. So that's Deuteronomy chapter 27. If you have any questions or comments about this particular chapter, please feel free to leave that in the comments section below. And tomorrow we'll have a bit of a longer read, but we'll read through Deuteronomy 28, which is going to talk about the blessings for obedience and the curses for disobedience. So a lot of text here that we'll read together and then have a few comments about, and that will be our read for tomorrow. I do appreciate you tuning in for our reading today, though. Hope you have a great rest of your Thursday. Have a great rest of your first day of June. June is here. The summer is in full swing. Actually, I don't know if it is technically the season of summer yet, but summer break for all of us, I believe, is in full swing for those who are involved in school and such. So make sure you enjoy it and be thankful to God for the blessings that we have, the beautiful weather. I tell you, we are very fortunate to live where we live here in East Tennessee, where God's beauty is very abundant. Let's be thankful for that. Let's take advantage of it. But as we are enjoying God's creation, make sure that we give him thanks for what he has given us. Again, have a great day, everyone. Take care, and God bless you.